Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining and welcome to Product People event. Before we start, a quick reminder that all our events are streamed on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitch. All our talks are also recorded and available post the event on YouTube as well as LinkedIn. So, in case you've missed something, feel free to go and check out our repository. However, the major perk of joining us live is that you get to interact with our guest, and you get to share your insights and questions with them as well. So moving forward, quickly introducing our session for today. So we're going to be talking about how to make your whole organization understand and support product work. And to talk about this with us, we have Mareike Bonitz, who's the director of product at Onomondo. And before we dive into the talk itself, I'd like to take a couple of minutes to introduce myself. So, my name is Zara Malik. I'm the Associate Product Management Consultant at Product People. I started my career in software engineering and later transitioned into product, having worked in multiple industries, including e commerce, maritime, cybersecurity, etc. Um, Yeah. A little bit of introduction on product people in case any of you aren't aware of us. So product people does product management, product ops, and transformation acceleration services through our 40 product managers, in-house product managers. And in addition to this, we also run a very large PM community in Europe with more than 60,000 members. And this is our slight way of giving back to the product community. Before we dive into our chat, we kind of want to get to know our audience. So here's a quick question for you, and you can log on to Slido to share your answers with us. If your product disappears tomorrow, what would break first for your customers or users? So their interaction with other tools, um, a critical step in their workflow, use cases powered by us and a partner together, or nothing significant? I think it's a very interesting question over there. And Marika, I would love to hear your thoughts on this as well.
Yes. Should I just give you my answer, Sarah?
Yeah, I would love to hear a little bit from you on this.
Yes. I mean, I work at a IoT company, so we are basically providing cellular connectivity for IoT use cases. And I think that's why I would definitely go for C. There is a lot that we can enable so that devices are actually empowered, and there is more data that we understand about devices. So I think while it's probably also a critical step in the workflow, I would say C.
I think it really depends on the type of product you have. If you have something that's enabling a lot of workflows across different products, so that in that case it has a lot of implications towards breaking other workflows as well. And I think just in general, uh, I think this could also be like true for all of the above could be true for any product as well.
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Moving forward, without further ado, I would like to hand the talk over to Marike, who is a product leader with almost 10 years of experience. And Marike, I'll let you introduce yourself further and move ahead with your talk.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and thanks everyone for the people that are watching right now, and that give me some of your precious time. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what I coin radical product sense. So basically trying to understand what we're doing in product and giving some of that understanding and thinking and passing it along in the whole organizations. And I hope it's going to be quite useful and actionable talk because I'll try to come with a lot of concrete examples on how I've been trying to do that in the product teams that I worked in. Just looking here. Yes, slides are working. So that's me. I don't want to bore you too much with who I am because I think it's more about the conversation. But yeah, as Sarah said, I'm Mareike. I've been working in products for over 10 years. Actually, mostly in startup and scale ups. So organizations that were quite immature when it came to the product function. So my specialty was to start these functions either from scratch or to scale them and make them a little bit more professional in ways. With that, also kind of scaling the product sense that we had in the companies. And starting out by basically gaining trust and making sure that people understand how we can contribute and how we're actually bringing value to the business and to the customer. So that's what I've been doing, trying to see different ways of how to do product, but of course also how not to do product, and trying to gather those learnings to then building up these teams from zero, basically. I live in Copenhagen, Denmark, so that's why you can see here a Lego figure of mine, and I also love to build and play with Lego. To kind of make you understand a little bit why we're here today, I want to talk to you about the hook, and that is that one of my dear engineering managers came to me one day and sent me a blog post by actually quite a respected tool called PostHog. They do actually really cool things, but they wanted to be, I think, a little bit clickbaity, and called their blog something like "Traditional Product Management is Broken. Here's how engineering can fix it." And it's one of these moments, when you just kind of like let it sink in and you don't want to judge, but you kind of get a little bit upset and maybe a little bit agitated. Because when you open up LinkedIn, you hear a lot about these things. People judging product management, people knowing better what it is, people saying we're not doing a good enough job, people saying our role is going to be automated away. And I was just kind of eye-rolling a little bit at it. But then diving into it, because of course I'm interested to also hear their arguments and reasoning. Normally engineering is quite reasonable as well. And I mean, they had some really good points, because what they were saying is that, of course, product management is something that is in the end quite cross-functional. So you can have a lot of product thinking that's actually embedded more in engineering. That can be product engineers, that can be the way you make decisions together. And in the end, although I was quite upset, I kind of agreed with most of the things that were in the article. What I did not really agree with, and I think that's kind of like the root cause of a lot of these arguments that we're seeing, is that even today, even after all of the Mareike books out in the world, nobody can really agree on what we do. There is no real standards to product management as such. And that can mean that we get misunderstood a lot of times. There are still people out there that believe that product management is actually more resonating with project management and coordination of projects initiatives. There are some that believe we are just there to facilitate stand-ups and to make sure that we're hitting certain deadlines, that there's Gantt charts and roadmaps, so everything that I would consider is delivery management. And then there are also people that sometimes feel a little bit like we make the calls and we make decisions and we decide what we're building. So we're kind of gatekeepers and make it actually hard to leverage decision making on higher levels. So I think, again, instead of always coming back to what actually is product, who has the mandate to make decisions, who can decide what it is we're saying yes and no to, there is something about not necessarily the function or the job, but actually the way of thinking about product. So instead of seeing products as, again, just a team that has a certain space to make the calls, I think it's way more about educating each other what it actually means to think in product terms, what it means to see risk, what it means to test, to validate before you start building, and why we're actually more of a strategic business function than anything else. So instead of becoming upset about these blog posts, instead of becoming very territorial that others want to know better what we're doing, I think it's about stop guarding these seats in these spaces and start teaching more about what we actually mean when we're saying we're product managers and what we mean when we're saying we're following best practices when it comes to product development. I also think that everyone wins in this case because that means that we can also go a little bit from maybe more sales-led or very engineering-driven organizations to more of a product operating model. And in the end, I think we are the ones that benefit the most from these changes as well. So my kind of talk here today is that instead of always asking for the space, for the mandates, for being disappointed that we do not get a seat at the table in some maybe more immature organizations, we can try to gift people some of that product thinking in their own context so that they can also be more successful in what they are actually doing. And how can we get there? Again, I'm a big some theory, some notions of how we can follow this. But what I will give you is basically a series of screenshots that I just took from our Notion database, where you can hopefully get inspired a bit, where you can also maybe have a mental checklist on, are these some things that you could potentially introduce in your organizations? They can be done on different levels. You do not have to be a product leader as such. It can also be when you're a product manager. And just, try to kind of reflect on those and see if any of those would even make sense in your context as well. I think the first one here is very much about communication and storytelling around products. So that's the first box of communicating the why. Not only the why of why are we building the things we're doing and why are we prioritizing the way we're doing, but also why are we here and why does it make sense for an organization to invest into products and product thinking. And for me, it's very important that people understand where we're coming from, because again, there is no common understanding of product function. You cannot just look it up. It might be the same for a lot of other functions out there, but of course, when you have a finance function, I think the main responsibilities are quite clear, which cannot always be said for products, sadly. So the first thing that we are doing is basically whenever there is a new person that's onboarded in Onomondo, we have an introduction presentation to products. And here we're already trying to be extremely transparent around how are we making decisions and calls. And that is not, for example, the call of sales. That's not a list of customer requests that are coming in. That's also not our founders that are making the calls. It all starts in the end with our company strategy and our product strategy. So that's already kind of showing them this is how we're seeing ourselves. That's our kind of like philosophy, and these are our core principles, to hopefully give them a little bit more guidance to also what they can expect of us. We're then trying to put that also on along the way so that people can follow us, and we're trying to make a lot of things transparent. So we're working with a methodology called opportunity solution trees, which you probably have heard a lot by Teresa Torres. And we're having this open and basically available for everyone to come in. Sometimes we're also getting questions. Why have there been certain trade-offs? Why have there been certain decisions made? And that's where we're inviting them in and being like, hey guys, this is our way to make some of that more objective. Again, it's not product that makes the call here. It's us trying to bring in tools to the organization to understand what is the right thing to build at this moment and what, again, could provide the biggest value. And that's been actually quite nice. I've been getting some questions from other functions where they were like, how do you prioritize? Because we're just getting requests and we're just kind of doing them. So there is also something to take away from certain decision frameworks or, again, prioritization frameworks that other functions can learn from as well. One of the things when it comes to communicating the why is very much speaking their language. I think there has been a book by Rich Mironov, one of the very old product management guys and one of the dinosaurs, recently, that we need to talk more commercial. and that we cannot bring a backlog to a fight when it comes around some of these very commercially driven decision making that also needs to happen. So that is something that I can also just confirm, that in order for us to make people understand how we're working, we need to meet them at least halfway. And with commercial, probably even a little bit more than that. So we need to understand how are they thinking and what does value actually mean for them. So something that we've been doing on Mondo is that we're not just necessarily showing the roadmap of what we're doing. So there is kind of like a public roadmap for everyone in Mondo to see, but we're also translating that for finance in this case. So that's something that we're running with our CFO. You can see that here we're trying to look more into leading signals, our drivers, we're looking at the lagging impact, we're looking at the revenue that we're getting out of there. And you can see even that there's some question marks around it because maybe we haven't been trained to think about the roadmap in those terms as well as we did, for example, in more technical terms. But it is a really good exercise and it really helped to bring more alignment, but also to understand some of the worries and concerns that, for example, finance had on budgeting, certain things on cost, all of these things that are relevant for the business. Another thing is that, again, as a best practice product organization, we don't just go out and build things, right? There is the whole kind of skill around product discovery, which in the end is nothing else than due diligence. We need to validate our assumptions. We need to test our hypotheses. And sometimes this mindset does not only benefit us, benefits everyone in the organization to kind of first test, does this actually provide value before we're going ahead and just doing a certain task or project. And in our case, this was quite helpful because we were looking at our pricing. So reiterating some of our pricing models there. This was, you could argue, also maybe a little bit of a learning moment because product tried to take full ownership of pricing, although it has been quite sales-led before. And that was too much. So there we could see that we were also trying to bridge these places too much in an organization that, again, was used to very different kind of decision making before. But what we try to do is letting everyone in that, again, we first need to make hypotheses before we're going ahead and kind of revamp our own pricing. Sometimes you're getting asked, okay, but when do you have this done? When is the new pricing out there? When can we make it public? But it's less about finding an output at a certain time, but looking at, okay, what do we know today? What can we test? And again, what can we validate so that we're actually more confident in getting something out there? And again, that helped finance a lot to understand that product development is not as much output driven as is actually is outcome driven. And for that, we need to, again, make sure that we're not just steamrolling, but that we're actually testing before we're building, so to speak. The other bucket I want to talk with you about is co-owning the strategy. So sometimes there is a lot of talks on, again, product management owning the what and the why. And to an extent, I believe that as well. But to an extent, in order for people to buy into our decision-making, I think it makes sense to let them in on some of this and to even co-own parts of the strategy. We started out some new cross-functional workshops just recently. Where we were actually inviting in all of the commercial leads and where we're laying out our roadmap and our prioritization for the first half of the year. And we were kind of like, okay, guys, that's the plate. It's already quite full, but this is what we're dealing with. But what are the signals in the market that you've been seeing that could potentially change our roadmap? And that was interesting because it was not just, basically a list of requests that came in. It actually became a quite fruitful conversation on what are the trade-offs we're seeing. If we're having a request coming in from partnership, how does that feed into the requests that we're seeing from CS? Some of the sales requests that we've been hearing from prospects could also customer success confirm that, right? So it became more of a team collaboration rather than, this one-to-one conversation on, okay, this is an absolute sales deal breaker, we need to build it. So again, the whole kind of skill set around trade-offs, trying to see what actually makes impact versus what is the effort and what can also help us all together, was really, really nice to see in that group. So you could argue that we could co-create parts of the roadmaps together because we were aligning just better. And the same goes with then some of the goals and the outcomes. So here you see our roadmap, which, as I mentioned, is public to everyone who works in Onomondo. And there are sometimes very cross-functional initiatives. So this one has to do with some of like the amount of carriers that we're having, very specific. But there's a lot of people involved. And before we kind of presented our plans, we made sure that the goals that we're setting here, but also the milestones, are aligned with all of them. And that kind of already bridges some gaps that make sure that there's co-ownerships. That means that also when there is some commercial success, we can celebrate as part of products. That means that if we're doing some very technical project, we have Yatish, who is our roaming specialist, knows exactly what's going on and can celebrate with us. So there is just more faster decision-making between us as well. Then, because also post-hoc was asking for it, is we actually make engineering do a lot of the product work, because we see that we have engineers who are very, very curious about that, and it makes a ton of sense. So we're also working with the product trio, which again is something that a lot of other organizations are doing. So we do not just have products, so not only product management and design making the calls, we're always inviting parts of engineering. And that can be, in this case, an engineering manager, this particular squad, but that can also sometimes be just a tech lead or just, again, an individual contributor in engineering. And that's important because, again, we can never know the whole breadth of what's going on, especially when it comes to a very technical product like we're dealing with in Onomondo, where we need some representation of tech debt, some representation of our architecture. And again, it just makes it easier to come to a certain understanding if we're giving engineering a lot of the context that we have to deal with in product as well. So that's been something that we've been trying now for about 2 years. And I would say with a lot of success. Again, for this, you need the curiosity of the engineers to have that kind of product mindset and to share it. But overall, it's been super nice. And again, so much faster and more effective decision-making based on that. The third bucket I want to talk about is democratizing data. I think a lot of product organizations sits on a ton of data. Then, of course, the question becomes how to analyze and how to make actual usable insights out of that. But for us, it was definitely a hook to also lure in other functions and to make them more see all the work that goes in and trying to be more data-driven as a function. And for that, we actually made commercial quite curious. So we brought out a couple of graphs on how product adoption is, so actually quite low-key metrics that probably a lot of you in your organizations have. And we iterated on them again and again. We were repeating to talk about them in some of our all hands. It was kind of like a thing that we would try to mention in a lot of meetings that we were having. And at some point, finance got really interested in it. Because again, it had a lot to do with what are the parts of the product we would like to invest in, how are we budgeting. And it actually got to the point where a lot of these data points made it also into our board presentations, for example. So again, a huge success and builds more trust and credibility because it shows that we're actually looking at data. It's not, again, just our CTO and co-founder who makes the calls and what we're building next. And it's also not just following what the customer wants. It's trying to see it more in a strategic and more holistic way. And again, has brought us a lot of praise. but also a lot of great conversation starters and a lot of interest in the product strategy that we're trying to follow. The same can go with any kind of product insights. Does not actually need to have to be this more product analytics style. And again, I think so many product teams have all of this data, and then they say, here's some links for 1 million of interviews that you can watch, or here's your access to post hoc or mixed panel. But we need to understand again that there needs to be context, and there needs to be kind of like the incentive to go and dive in. So what we've been doing, so we're using Slack as an internal communications tool, is whenever we're having touch points with customers, to share some very like bite-sized snippets and be like, hey guys, this is the customer. This is kind of like the data that we have around the customer. This is what they've been saying. So the next steps here is X, Y, Z. That can also be some of the data that we got from an NPS score. That can also be some of the work we did on our ideal customer profile. But it's just to share, to again promote some of the work that we're doing, to kind of set the scene for why we're doing it. And sometimes it sparks some really cool conversations with, again, then account executives that kind of challenge some of the things that customers have been saying. Or again, it kind of makes us more trustworthy and kind of speaks the language that we want to see in the whole organization, which is relying on the data that we already have in hand, as long as we can analyze them nicely. And then I think the most important and probably also the most difficult part is measuring success, right? I think that's something that I said again and again when I started out in Onomondo. We're not just building for the sake of building, we want to provide value. Well, then we also need to show that quite frequently. And that's tough because sometimes you don't have the tools to measure it. And that's tough because there's so much on our plates that we can simply forget about past releases and deployments and just move on to the next thing because, yeah, there's a lot of traction already on the next thing, right? But it is very important. And I'm showing again a screenshot of the roadmap because what we've been trying to do is whenever an initiative comes onto the roadmap, we have to be able to say this is how we're tracking if something is successful or not. And again, we're making that open for everyone to see so that they can also follow along. And that again, this thinking of, oh, we build it, now it's done, is over. Because when we're building something, we need to maintain it. And there is tech debt and it accumulates. And again, if we actually find that what we set out to do didn't really resolve, we didn't solve the customer problem, we didn't provide them value, well, then we have to actually go back to square one. And then we also cannot anticipate revenue or upsells or more money, right? So I think that's probably the most powerful thing, is to prove maybe on a daily, maybe on a quarterly basis that what you're doing actually has an impact. Because then again, you show this is why we're doing all the things we're doing. And you show that you can earn the trust and that you can also sometimes make those calls. So what it takes to get there is not too much, I have to tell you. I mean, again, I've been at Onomondo for about 3 years now, and that's kind of like the bar where we've been taking things. Some things were more successful than others. But of course, you need to have the product operating model, if you want to call it that. You need to have the ways of working of product, or else I don't think this is going to fly. Again, you also need someone who believes in products to contribute in that way. So if you have no one on the executive level that sees product as a strategic business function, it's very difficult to establish yourself as that. Then you can go ahead and I think what Pippa Top, another amazing product speaker, called it, creates small pockets of brilliance in your everyday. But of course, then it's more difficult to have that impact on an organizational level. And again, what's very important is to build trust over time. So, of course, it's important that we're getting a seat at the table, that we're not project managers, et cetera, et cetera. But it's also good to sometimes just help out and support the business in their needs. So product work is never going to be perfect in a way. I think there is always a spectrum and a scale on how far we can go. But in order for people to respect us and also to respect our craft, we sometimes need to do what we can to help and build trust with that. What it also does not mean now, by having a full organization, having more product sense, that everyone just decides the roadmap, right? We cannot now just go ahead and be like, this is a democracy, now let's vote, because there is something in our experience, in our skill set, that makes us more more useful or more helpful in driving some of these initiatives. We have been going through this so many times, so we have an instinct, an intuition of how to do product as well, and I think it's very important to bet on that. It also does not mean that we don't have to come with suggestions, recommendations on how to prioritize. Again, we should be the expert of the market, the industry, the customer. So whatever we're recommending in terms of prioritization, etc., usually there is a foundation for that. And please, let's use that, and let's keep on being those experts as well. It also does not mean that there will not be pushback. So again, there's always going to be the times where I think back and I'm like, yeah, people really do not understand what I'm doing. People have no idea why I'm doing this. And I think that's fair, again, because we're not at a stage where we can just open a book and look up what product management is. It is extremely contextual. So yeah, I think that's just the reality we live in, that there's always going to be conflict because we're in the center of the conflict, right? We're trying to bridge the tech part and the commercial part, and usually there's conflict, and that's usually also the beauty of it. How we know it's working, and again, that's a little bit like measuring success. I don't have any very clear, strong KPIs, but hopefully it brings us to communicate clearer, to align more easily when it comes to roadmaps, to prioritize faster, because again, people understand how we're making these decisions. And in the end, of course, trying to be more data-driven, which can be useful for any function in an organization. So yeah, my kind of recommendations to you is to just gift some product sense whenever you can. It's not always defending why we are here. It's not always saying we're not broken because X, Y, Z. But in the end, it is about trying to make people understand that we need to think about business and customer value. And if there is more people in your organization that thinks in that way, it scales just beyond product and engineering and design. It scales across, and that will have a much higher impact as well. So for the next minute, I'd like to, again, have you reflect a little bit on how might you Trojan horse product sense in your organizations. And I'm very, very, looking very much forward to your questions that you might have, your concerns, your challenges, maybe also some of your examples on how that worked.
Thank you, Mareike. This was lovely. I think this is this age-old question that all product managers have come across every single point in their newly joined organization. It's, what exactly do you do?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think we do a little bit of everything, to be very honest. We're chameleons of sort, we're chameleons of sort in a way that we blend into whatever the requirement of the product is from us. We blend into
True.
delivery managers, we blend into managing projects and managing Jira and doing a little bit of product ops if needed, anything to push the product out or the best value out to the customer. I think we do all of it.
Yes. Yes, so true. Like someone also said that like it's a little bit like being an octopus, you know, like you have your all of your arms in very different parts of the organization. And again, that's usually what I love about the job. But sometimes it also helps to make the role or responsibilities clearer for people to kind of have the right expectations for what you're doing as well.
Yeah, I think it was really nice to hear that the tools and the techniques and the general best practices that you've established in order to just build that product spirit into your organization. Um, but I think thank you for our listeners for being there and watching this talk and going through this. And please head to Slido to submit any of the questions that you might have. And while you're drafting your questions, it gives me a little bit of chance to talk a little bit more about product people. Essentially, we are typically invited to join teams as interim product managers or product leaders. As product coaches or consultants to upskill product management or operations teams, and to accelerate transformations in teams. Here's a quick sneak peek of some of the clients that we've with in the past. Um, so here's some key stats about our organization. We've supported uh, sorry, here are comes some quick stats. So we've supported over 690 teams ever since we started functioning. We're about 40 product group of product leaders and product managers in house, and as a woman, it makes me super happy to say that most of our team, almost 60% of us, are women, and 60% of our leadership consists of women, which is much rarer, and it's super cool for us to be able to say this. Um, so yeah, thank you for listening, and we'll be waiting for our users to start sending in the questions. But yeah, just a quick question on my end. Like, given how AI tools have come into the play right now, where everyone can prototype and everyone can start coding a little bit of things and start getting them tested. So the lines between engineering and design and even analytics, because there are tools now where you can just put in all that big data sets and then get analytics done there as well, they're becoming really blurry. So, how would you suggest that we start framing product managers as an advantage there, and how do we distinguish ourselves from the rest of the functions?
Yes, I think that's a very good question because I think it's sometimes, as you're saying, it's hard. There's so much that you can do, and so many parts of different jobs can now be taken over. I think in the end, the all this potential is kind of just amplifying the fact that sure, with all of these tools, we can build more things, but there need to be some people that know or find out what are the right things to build. And I think that will stick to products as a function. And maybe again, like it will be more engineering that also takes more part of that puzzle, but that strategic understanding of what is it that actually moves the needle and that has an impact, I think becomes more and more important, because I think that there will be so many products being churned out also with AI nowadays, that you can only really win if you have a strategy and a vision, and if your product actually gives the value. So again, the strategic part of product management, I think, will become more and more important over the next years. And then the question becomes, who is taking part in that work? But that's why I think it is so essential to spend time with customers, to understand the market and the industry, instead of just going rogue and just building.
Yeah, I think it does end up giving product managers, contrary to what everybody thinks, that AI is taking away jobs and everything. I think it's giving us an advantage in terms of taking the
Yes,
mundane and manual and admin work off our plates and giving us the room to actually work on strategy and data and all of these things.
exactly. Yes.
Yeah, so we have some questions from our audience. I'll quickly read them to you so that we can start talking about them one by one. So, sales and support often have conflicting goals, which puts product in quite in the middle. How do you usually handle that, and who makes the final call in the discussions?
Yeah, that's a good one. And I feel that person as well. I think, again, in this case, it is going back to what I said and trying to understand the different perspectives and points, right? Because it is oftentimes about incentives when it comes to alignment. So, sales, they need to hit their targets, they want to have their commissions, they're thinking very short term, maybe more opportunistic. Whereas support, they're on the back end, right? They have to deal with all the problems that are coming in, maybe some of the things that we promised prospects that we do not have, etc. So I think it's about aligning some of those incentives as well, trying to see that each end sees the other side, and trying to provide a space where some of that can be argued for. Who makes the call in those discussions that depends, I think, on the organization you're in. Again, if you're very sales led, I think it's more common that sales just makes the calls because we need to bring in that deal. If you're thinking a little bit more long term, sustainable business, more product led, then of course you're thinking more about the strategic side of things. So again, what is the impact of actually building this for prospect A? What is the money there we're seeing, but also what is the maintenance that we have to do? So you're trying to see it from different angles. And in order to see that, of course, again, you need to understand where people are coming from and also part of their language. So what I think does not help is to come out and be the product person and talk in product terms, because then again, it's, I think, harder for people to understand why that should help them specifically.
Lovely. I think we have a very similar question again. So,
Okay.
how do you get sales and customer success actually interested in product discussions? What was an aha moment that they experienced in your experience when it finally clicked?
Yes, that's a good one. And I think really hard because I had the experience to bring out a lot of information, but it wasn't relevant for the people. So I think it is also again trying to see it from their perspectives, customer success. They're very much interested in the health score of their customers. How are my customers or my accounts using the product? So that's kind of where we caught them, some of the data on product adoption, and trying to make decisions on, again, where should we invest in our product to potentially see an upsell or expansion for customers. What actually brings in growth for our customers? What provides value? And by putting out some of that data, and then also you could argue targeting some of these initiatives that customer success had, we could really gain their interest. Again, it's helping them where they're at, trying to see it more cross-functionally. When it comes to sales, I think here it's also like you need to understand how they're thinking. In this kind of case, we're very much aligning on, again, what do you need to see as part of the product for prospects to sign deals? What then makes sense to do it strategically? Again, when is it not just a one-off request that's coming in, but where can we see trends in the markets that would mean that we could, for example, find a new audience, a new targets in that market, or where we can also maybe see more expansion or upsell of the customer base that we're having. So again, trying to translate some of the insights, some of the data that we're sitting at into their context and bringing it to them, and also inviting them to be like, what would you say here? What kind of challenge do you see that helped us a lot in our context?
Yeah, and I think just to add here, like ops roles, like sales or customer success, any roles that are on ground tend to be very short-sighted with their goals because they're on the line of fire at that moment. So it's always great
Yes.
to frame it that, oh, we'll solve your problem today like this, but in the future, the long-term strategy about solving X and Y problems that you're going to keep recurring is this. So how do you feel about this?
Yeah, very good point.
Yeah, we have a couple more questions. How do you make company adopt product strategy? What is the process to handle this learning curve among non-product teams?
Yes. I've just been seeing actually a really nice post about strategy where people think you just do strategy once and it's this document and it lives. But there's so much about strategy, like the pre work, the strategy, and then the communication. So there's a huge red tail to this. For me, it's important that, again, a product strategy is not isolated. So we have to always see it in the context of the business strategy. If there is no business strategy, it's a whole other problem, and I think will probably also be a problem on other levels. But that's usually where I start. What are the challenges that we're seeing in the company? How can we overcome them? And how does product help in this case? So we're working with some sort of decision stack, which I think is also very common, where we're looking at the business strategy, the business goals. We're trying to feed it into a product strategy that sits more on specific pillars. And then we're trying to trickle that down into the different kind of product teams that we're having. How can they contribute more bottom up to those goals and strategy? And again, it needs to be a lot of storytelling. People need to understand how they can contribute to the strategy, also if they're not part of product. And that's sometimes more easy, more difficult, depending on what kind of product you are. And again, how mature product is as part of your organizations. It definitely helps to get a lot of allies. So ping-ponging with other functions, having them read through your drafts of the strategy, having them challenge you and being like, oh, but there's also the sales challenge that we're not addressing here. What can we do about that? I think, again, trying to make it very transparent and open what we're trying to do, inviting people to it, trying to get a lot of feedback cross-functionally, then I think you will get more buy-in. And then, of course, you also need to follow up, keep on repeating what the strategy is, and again, seeing how you're tracking now that the strategy is in place.
I think very well said, especially in terms of storytelling. I think it's the easiest way to rally people around a single cause and just get everyone motivated that, oh, this is the end goal that we're working towards. Um, so I think that was great insights. How can we prevent cross-functional work from turning into design by committee?
Yes, I think that's a really good question, because that's also one of the failures we had, that you're trying to, again, like have almost too much consensus, right? And then there's everyone who has something to say here. And then there's the expectations that we need to do what people have been saying. So again, I think it's always about making clear what the purpose is by inviting people. Some organizations, they have like racy things where they know exactly who's responsible, accountable, involved, informed. You can try to bring in some layers. For us, we're still a very small organization. So then it's again setting the right expectations. When we, for example, had the cross-functional workshop with the commercial leads and sales, we were not saying, now you can come and we're creating the roadmap together. We kind of said, this is why the roadmap looks like it is today, because of these informed decisions. There is some more space to maybe change things around or reprioritize in the second half of the year. Please bring in your information in this specific way where we can see what actually is the impact. And then we can tell you a little bit also what would be the effort, and then we can decide together, right? So I think it's about making very clear where people can come in, but also making clear that this is not now a free-for-all and everyone can say and everyone decide, because I think that just actually leaves you in the worst space where you have been trying to be inclusive, but then people don't get out what they hoped, and then they will stop collaborating with you.
Yeah, I think this happens a lot, especially when you're dealing with multiple stakeholders. And I think the one thing that works really well is to say that, oh, this is what the proposal is, and if you want to challenge the proposal, you have to come with evidence and data in order to
Yes.
change it. So it's just people don't start working on opinions; they start thinking about, oh, if we want something that we want prioritized, then we have to back it up with evidence that why this is more important than other things.
Yes, exactly.
Perfect. One last question from the audience. How long did it take you in the company to establish frameworks you presented? Would you say that they are now set in stone?
I wish. Absolutely not set in stone. And this is also what I meant with, there's always going to be pushback. And I mean, an organization is like a living thing, right? Like, for example, a lot of my stakeholders on the executive level, they change. So then I need to build up relationships again for them to understand why I'm here. And I need to figure out what do they expect of me. So there is always, especially in startup scale up worlds, there is a lot of change. So nothing will be ever set in stone. But what helps again is for the whole product team, first of all, to have the mandates to come up with these ideas. So that's not at all just my work. That's a lot of work of my team that were trying to figure out themselves, how can we build better bridges? How can we make sure that people think more how we're doing in these ways? And I don't think necessarily there is a timeline. As I said, there are some prerequisites to this, which I would say definitely executive sponsorship is very important. But of course, I would say just try to see it as experiments. Try to see, does this work? Did that actually help? There's a lot of things that we tried which also just did not work at all. So it is trying to bring it more into your context. And again, there will be times where you sit in a meeting where you hoped this other person knew exactly what you were talking about, and you will be like, yeah, they have no idea what product management is. And that's, I think, also okay.
Yeah, I think we had a bunch of really, really, really great questions and lovely
Yes.
insights from you, Mareike. I mean, I have to say that I really enjoyed the talk and the Q&A session. Uh, and to our audience that's joining us, thank you all for listening. And in case that you'd want to stay connected with us, feel free to scan the QR to subscribe to our newsletter. We publish one every month, and we have exciting stories and our experiences that we put in the newsletter. Moving on to on to what we have next in the arsenal. So next week we'll be presenting the product frameworks, AI in product and industry trends by Varun Kalyan, who's the director of product at Marriott International. And thank you everyone for joining. I hope you really enjoyed the talk. And thank you, Mareike. It was lovely having you there.
Yes. Thank you so much for everyone's time. It was great.